Hey guys, Andrew Erickson here, the host of the Zon Con Podcast. Today we have two of some of my best friends in the industry, best friends period, and also in the industry. Chris Rawlings, who was also on this podcast a few episodes ago, and Alycia Shapiro. This is your first time on the podcast, right, Alycia?
It is.
Awesome. And
Excited.
you guys are in my
I'm glad you
accountability.
corrected yourself.
You guys are in the my accountability group, which is the little meeting we have every week to kind of go over the stuff that we do for each week. We should have a whole podcast on that, accountability groups.
We definitely should.
Oh, definitely. We definitely could. We got plenty of material, plenty of things to talk about.
So, and we actually were having a little conversation in our group, and and also I want to tell you guys, these guys are also in Titan, and they're also multi-seven-figure sellers and all that like big stuff. They're super cool, awesome people, worth listening to. So, and I actually in our little accountability group, we were having a conversation on whether e-commerce is in its infancy, or if it's just the beginning, or if it's maturing, or what it looks like.
But a fetus.
And Alycia and Chris disagreed a little bit, and I was like, oh my God, we got to get this on the podcast. So Chris, you said that it's a fetus. Alycia, what do you think?
I said it was a toddler.
Toddler. Okay, so let's explain.
Okay. Well, I think that people often talk about e-commerce as if it's in its infancy, and I do think that actually sounds really cool. I think saying it's in its infancy sounds much cooler than saying it's a toddler, right? But I think when you actually look at the development of something and what those words mean, I think it's certainly past the fetus stage.
Fetal. It hasn't even gotten its umbilical cord cut yet. It's just barely peeking out and still attached to the mother in its womb. That's how young it is. Barely, I wouldn't even call it infancy. And I'm going to say that because it's hard to see how fast things change when you're living life as a human. But this is the first time in all of human history that the pace of change has gotten to the point where you can notice it in a human life. If you look like throughout human history, it's been 12,000 years since the agricultural revolution, where we stopped going around foraging for berries and antelope and stuff like that and started actually farming. From that time, everybody who was born before or after the agricultural revolution, they were born and then they lived their whole lives and they died. And the same technology that existed when they were born was the same technology that existed when they died. They didn't have change, like massive paradigm shifts happening in the span of a human lifetime. And that was all of human history, all the way up until just the last 100 years. It's only been the last 100 years that really the pace of change has caught up with the period of time that a human life takes up, which is 80 years. So this is new to us, and we're not used to seeing change happen this fast. And human beings have never been in a position like this before, which is why I think it's the most exciting time ever to be alive. But it causes this kind of mental fallacy where it always feels like you're kind of late to the game. When I was dabbling in cryptocurrency in 2012, I thought I'm late to the game. Everybody's gotten to it before me. People bought Bitcoins when they were $8. Now they're $150. Most of the growth has already happened, but I still did my projects in crypto. But if I had recognized that, what I now see as a truism, that every time it feels like you're late, you're actually early, and likely really, really, really early, I would have held my freaking Bitcoins and been a multi-Bitcoin millionaire by now, or decamillionaire even. I mean, I had so many Bitcoins at that period of time. I was trading them, I was doing Bitcoin hardware, but I didn't recognize that I was still on the early part of the curve, because it's hard to recognize, because you day by day, you don't see the change happening. But when you look back over the period of a couple of years, it's dramatic, and it's not linear, it's exponential. And that exponential aspect of it is what makes me think that e-commerce is in its fetal stage, because
Perfect.
I think that like the vast majority of the growth of this industry has not been actualized or realized yet. I think we're still barely coming out of the womb.
So, Chris, I know that you've been in a bit of the tech and Amazon world for a minute, but Alycia, you've been selling online since like 2004 or something?
2003.
2003. Oh, yeah, 2003. And so you've seen
an OG.
I am an OG, although there are definitely people who have been on there like a few years earlier than me. And it's funny, in 2003, I even felt like, oh my God, am I too late? Because I knew people that had been doing it since 1998 or 1999. But I have seen such a huge development. Chris, I think that the argument that you made is actually really a good one. And I think that you were really looking at things from a macro level that I hadn't considered, which is funny coming from my background. But it's almost like you're really looking at the evolution of human life as opposed to the evolution of a human life, right? So, and in that respect, I get your argument. I really do. We are far from an Australopithecus as we are walking around as Homo sapiens right now. So I think that the argument is kind of more like that. But when I think about infancy and what it means, right, it's the early stage of human development, right? And so I even looked it up last night. What does it mean? And one thing I read was that it was about infancy is from birth into the acquisition of language, whereas toddlerhood is a stage of development where you're having cognitive, emotional, and social development really kind of take off. So if we look at it more on like that level, I feel like we've kind of gotten past what is the internet. Initially it was like a web publishing thing, and it was very one-sided. People came and they read what other people produced. It was usually just on pictures. It wasn't even query-based. And then that slowly changed over time. And I do think that we have a language to talk about it, and we have the infrastructure. We kind of, as a society, get what it is. But then I absolutely think how we use it and how we talk about it and the things that are available on it will change over time. But like that's true for humans as well. Like
what's changed? What's changed since 2003?
Number one, usage. So the number of people that are on it is huge. So we've gone from such a small number of purchases online. And so yes, we still only have 10% or something like that in the developed world, of maybe even less. I don't know, Andrew, numbers stick in your head, not in mine, of how many purchases are online. So people's behavior has certainly changed. Back then, the ability, the need to answer phone calls was so much greater. People, even if they were going to place the order online, they wanted to call first and make sure it was real.
Oh, dude, I don't even answer my phone ever.
Well,
ever.
Gotten stale back in 2003 if you didn't answer your phone. And we had a lot of competition that didn't stick around, went through the same courses we went through, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like the difference was we acted and treated it like a brand and like a company from the beginning. And we answered the phone and we created a good customer experience. So anyway, for us,
good mix of old school and new school, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we made it work. But now we get very few phone calls, right? So people trust it more, that it's a real thing just because they found it online. I feel like that's changed a lot. Obviously, the technology has changed completely. The ability to do, funnels more effectively and to not have to have the ability to code, things that are much more plug and play. It's, I see Amazon and Shopify and things like that as the democratization of the internet, because it makes it just easier for everyday guys and gals to make money online without having to be a wizard like you guys.
And I was totally convinced, Chris totally convinced me, and now Alycia, you totally convinced me that it's not in its infancy. I like that definition.
Hell yeah, we're both good at this.
I like that definition that infancy is when you're like developing language, and toddlerhood is when you start developing social cues and stuff. I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense for like ecom, doesn't it?
That's it just good. Really depends on if it's micro macro. I got to say, when Chris was done, I was like, oh shit. he convince
Yeah,
me.
one other like thing that causes us to perceive reality in the way that we perceive it is the fact that we can remember the past, but we can't remember the future. Like you can chart the course of the past pretty accurately because it's recorded, and you can go back and watch it or remember it yourself, and you project subconsciously into the future based on what happened in the past, but you don't do it exponentially. You do it linearly. You're thinking like, well, this is the change that happened in the last 5 years, so this will probably be what happens in the next 5 years. But the problem with that is the amount of change that's going to happen in the next 5 years is 10 times what happened in the last 5 years, not the same that happened in the last 5 years. So it's almost, it makes it really, really tough to predict the future, but a lot of things are going to happen in our lifespan that are going to blow our minds. Like we're going to see the first trillionaire ever in human history in our lifetime. We're going to approach the period where digital reality is more real, or at least more pleasurable than physical reality, and more vivid. And we're going to approach the period where there's a fluid boundary between the digital and the physical, where 3D printing lets you bring the digital into the physical, and 3D scanning lets you bring the physical into the digital. And we'll be in a point where it's not as clear cut a delineation between the digital world and the physical world. And all of that's going to open up completely unpredictable, unknowable changes in like the very fabric of commerce and society, but on a scale that's much larger than we've ever seen, many orders of magnitude larger, in my opinion.
You know, that reminds me a little bit, Chris. I had my newborn daughter, she's 4 months old, so she is an infant.
You mean the TikTok superstar, the TikTok influencer?
Yeah, she's hot on TikTok.
Actually, my daughter's TikTok follower soon.
Yeah.
I had her sitting in my lap, and I had my laptop there, and I was like, look, here's a spreadsheet, look, here's a financial report and stuff, like just kind of joking. I was talking to my wife, and I said, I wonder, like, she'll probably never have to do any work that isn't on a laptop, right? Like, what would she do 30 years from now when she's in her career? She's gonna be on a laptop. And I thought, well, wait a minute,
sure.
On a laptop, she'll probably have some sort of like mind meld, like
she'll read about laptops in textbooks. Well, not textbooks. She'll learn about it on her in her brain chip.
Yeah, I mean, even Elon Musk came out with the Neuralink thing, right? Or the little computer interface of the brain. I'm like, oh man, we're gonna be like one giant like hive mind.
I am not putting any microchip in me, and I don't know if that is just my age talking on that, or if I'm just correct. I love technology and I trust it, but I don't want it in me.
Well, the thing that's going to happen, I mean, I strongly feel that we are the last few generations of humans as we know them. I think that either in a couple generations from now, humans will be completely extinct, not just as we know them, but completely in general, because artificial intelligence will have far surpassed human intelligence. And I know it sounds crazy, but I would bet like everything I have on this outcome. If I was to like predict both outcomes, or humans won't be extinct, but will be in such an unrecognizable form that you may not even call them humans.
I think it's going to take a long
with
time.
Technologies.
I don't think unless we destroy ourselves, which is a different conversation. I think that human evolution is still ongoing, but I think that it's much slower than that. Now, it's something that you said previously, which I think kind of ties into that, back to our original conversation on e-commerce, is about evolutionary jumps. So I feel like that's what we will definitely see that. It's really hard to forecast, just like you said. You can look back in time, you can see patterns of things, you can understand how things developed, and then you can even pinpoint, things that jump-started whole new segments of human existence. You mentioned one previously with the agricultural revolution. Some would argue that was the single most important event in all of human history, because it enabled us to live in one place, and it enabled us to specialize, right? So we have those moments in time with e-commerce as well, where we have evolutionary jumps.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's hard to predict what happens. It's not hard to predict when it happens, because it follows a pretty clear exponential curve. Like you can look at, okay, when did mobile technology become mass adopted? That was really only 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, you could say in that range. But the internet was 25, 30 years before that, but not mass adopted until maybe 20 years before that. And, you know, PCs, another 20 years before that. But before that, it was like, what was significant before that? The Industrial Revolution?
Internal combustion
150
engines.
years?
Internal combustion engine was a big one that allowed flight and other stuff. And then of course the Industrial Revolution was big. But that was like, like 200 years. And then like 100 years later, and then it's like 20 years later, then it's 10 years later, then it's 3 years later. Like the
exactly.
the paradigm quicker.
Yeah. Like if you think about the things that happened in my grandparents' lifetime, they went from the horse and carriage, right, to seeing the car, to seeing planes. And then, you know, like there's just so many things that happened in their lifetime.
Yeah, more happened in my lifetime than happened in your grandparents' entire lives. You know, my lifetime, there's been way more technological advancement in my only 30 years of life than there was in your grandparents' entire lifetime. So I don't even, so God knows what the next 30 years bring.
Sorry, I interrupted you. It doesn't, for some reason, for me, having watched most of the revolutions that you just talked about in terms of like going from, you know, rooms full of giant servers to home PCs, and most people having one. We had one when I was growing up, but that was a rarity, right? Got on AOL.com, and you know, there wasn't on what was it, Comcast? I can't even remember what I'm thinking about.
The AOL CDs would come in the mail, and then like you get a CD on the internet. Like here, put this in. Like, you have internet now with a CD.
I used to steal them by the dozens because I made a parabolic solar reflector that could light things on fire out of them.
Nice.
I would go to Blockbuster and take like 50 of them at a time, and then I just I arranged them into a parabolic reflector for a science project at my school.
Nice.
But all I wanted to do was light stuff on fire.
Dude, microwave.
And it worked.
That's the cool thing. You microwave them, and the little metal inside the CD will spark up. It's really cool.
Oh, I've seen really YouTube videos of that. Yeah.
Why nerds rule the world, ladies and gentlemen, right there. I think that I agree with you, Chris, but I think that at least having someone who's lived through a number of those things, it doesn't feel so different to me. It feels like a normal progression to go from PCs to having things in my hand. I feel like that feels like a lot more normal than going from a horse to a plane.
I'd say that you probably wouldn't have said that before it happened, though. If somebody came up to you 20 years ago and was like, it'll be normal for you to chill with your friends and everybody be on their phone or have their phone in their hands, you'd be like, nah, that'll never happen. Or they'd be like, you'll freak out if you ever leave the house without this one device.
Yep.
And you'll think that you can't live without it. You'd be like, nah, I'm fine. Don't need that.
But
now it feels normal.
We're going to have to quote, we're going to pull out that quote, Alycia. We're going to pull out the quote, like, I'm never mind melding. I'm going to pull that quote and give it to you in 15 years. And you're like, and I'll download it into your
I'll be like,
mind. And you'll be like, what?
I can't believe I said that.
That's so true.
I would never give up my mind chip. It feels normal.
I really like my humanity, you know? I was going to say something I thought was super important about the idea of having it with your hand. Oh yeah, it wasn't actually that important, but the idea of thinking that we would all be on our phones. I don't think as a teenage girl, I would have thought that was so abnormal. I would have been like, wait, I can still talk to my friends on my phone no matter where I am. I don't have to be laying on my stomach in my bedroom because I happen to get my own. I was fancy. I had my own private line in our house with the cord, you know? So I would have been happy to have that phone with me anywhere I went, but I don't think I could have imagined
all the boys
it.
calling. Hi, Mr. Shapiro. Can I talk to Alycia, please?
That would have been super awkward since that's my ex-husband's name, but yeah. Like I
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
born.
true.
So
Yeah.
there's this cool idea called or this cool concept of leapfrog technology, right? So if you look at how just telephones were adopted in the United States. So the telephone was invented in the United States, and so we had the most number of telephones per person forever until for whenever it was invented in 1870, whatever, until 1990. That's corded phones, right? Landlines. And Mexico actually almost didn't have any landlines at all. There was something like United States in 1990, 95% of households, so basically everyone, had a landline in 1990 United States, and like 5 or 10% had a landline in Mexico. Because think about it, you got to tear up the ground, you got to lay down the wire just so that you can call someone when most people you care about live in your neighborhood anyways, right? So they didn't really need it. However, instead of doing one line per house, per housing unit, you can just build 3 giant towers in the city, and now you can give everyone cell coverage. And if you look at the cell coverage in Mexico, they actually had twice the number of cell phones per person in the late 90s than the United States did. Because going from landline to cell phone, especially when cell phones are like really expensive, and back then all they did was call. They didn't actually like update your status on Facebook
everything.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that big of a leap to go from landline to cell phone. So Americans didn't have that many cell phones, but Mexicans going from nothing to a cell phone was incredible. So the adoption of cell phones in Mexico was drastically faster than the United States. It took about 30 years for cell phones to kind of be saturated in the United States, and it took about 10 years in Mexico. The cool thing is that we see this kind of, bring it back to ecom. we see this potential. We currently see this happening, and of course, there's a huge potential going forward in a lot of developing countries. Africa is a huge one that's starting to really wake up and starting to be a huge economic demand. Of course, Asia is China's already more digitally connected than America is at this point. There was something like 1% internet connection before 2004, and now there's more cell phone, more data per person consumed in China than the United States in just 15 years. So ecom's going to be huge going forward, and we're going to see the stuff that like takes 10, 20 years to happen in the United States will leapfrog and take only 5 years in these developing countries.
Yeah, I was amazed. I lived in Shanghai from 2018 to the beginning of 2019, and even hobos had QR codes instead of upside down hats. Like even beggars would use QR codes. Like it was almost cash almost barely exists there. Wow. It was like they were like 5-10 years ahead of New York City, heralded as the greatest city in the world.
So they're like, can I have $1 for some bread, and here, put it to my WeChat?
Yeah, WeChat. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you would way sooner be homeless than phoneless in China.
Sooner homeless than phoneless. I like that.
I see a quote card coming.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely bonkers. This is the coolest thing about being alive now is the fact that change happens in a life. Like I'm so stoked that I live now versus in the 1800s or in 6000 BC or any other time in human history, because like I said, I strongly believe the controversial thought or opinion that we're the last couple generations of humans, period. And so I feel that I got to see how far this thing goes, and the next consciousness, whatever form that takes, in the cloud, in robots, whatever it is, like that's cool. They'll take it as far as they can too. But as a human being, I got to see the furthest it could possibly go. And I also get the excitement of having all of this change and new opportunity opened up to me year after year that didn't exist the year before. And that's why being an entrepreneur is cool. Like if you're at a regular job where you do the same thing every day and you're highly specialized, you're a project manager or you're an engineer or whatever you are, you don't get to play in the game. You're out of the game, dude. You're just a cog in the machine. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the game. Your whole job is to see opportunities and put the parts together to exploit the opportunity or take advantage of the opportunity. And so you get to be part of the advancement of human society and the advancement of consciousness in this universe as a whole, which that's dope. Like it's that you're part of the few. You're like the leading edge of the wave. And so congrats, whether you're succeeding or not, like at least you're in the game. You're in the Coliseum. You're like in the arena. You're not on the sidelines or underneath pushing the cogs around.
Well, if anyone's listening to this who is not an entrepreneur, I think you've just been inspired to become one. Because that was beautiful, Chris.
Come join the pack.
I don't agree with you on the first part of your little diatribe there, but I do really appreciate what you said about us being in it. And I am also so grateful to be alive at this point in human history and seeing, number one, to be amongst the most amazing group of people, right?
And handsome.
And handsome. With my fellow Titan leaders. I love being with you guys, and you've made my life so much better. But I think that, I can't believe, as a parent, I certainly don't want to believe that we are reaching the end of the line. But also, I think that as hard as humans have been on the earth, that we've also done a lot of good, and that we have a lot more good to do.
Well, it's not the end of the line. It's just it's like the caterpillar turning into butterfly thing, right? It's not the caterpillar die. In some ways the caterpillar dies, but the caterpillar turns into a butterfly. So let me give you a nice little example of so this idea is called transhumanism, right? So like a little idea, look at an average person today, or let's look at myself, right? So I'm 6'5". I've never really had any medical issues at all. I'm immune to all vaccinatable. Is that a word?
Sure.
All diseases with vaccines. There you go. And I can just jump anywhere I want in the world with in a few hours. I can go 1,000 miles an hour in an airplane. I can go 100 miles an hour in a car. I can do those different things. That would be absolutely unimaginable to basically, now of course I'm saying this during COVID, so it's not a good example, but most people don't die of infectious diseases anymore. And people, the average height used to be 5 feet, now it's closer to 6 feet for men, right? And the lifespan went from 30 to 80, right? Just in the last 200 years. That's the kind of thing, like, are we still humans? Yeah, like biologically, DNA wise, we're still humans. We're still the same DNA we had 1,000 years ago. But like, if you look at the difference, like look at an average human today compared to 500 years ago, and there's a drastic difference. If you're an archaeologist or whatever, a person who studies species.
An anthropologist.
Well, anthropologist is like, say, humans. Archaeologists, no.
No, archaeologists study artifacts. Anthropologists study a number of different things. Culture is one of them, but also the biological anthropologist would study the human.
There you go. Perfect. There you go. Would you, if you look back on this, would you consider it the same species? Like, are we more different to our humans 1,000 years ago than a coyote is to a wolf?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would argue that we are still Homo sapiens in that regard. So if you took us and you put us into an agricultural society, we would be bored out of our minds.
Before agriculture, though, because that was the beginning of
even as hunter-gatherers, if we had knowledge, right, of the hunter-gatherer, we knew what foods to eat, and we could fashion a spear, and we could kill an animal, and we could hunt, and we could gather berries, and we could make food if we had fire, right? As long as we knew those things existed, so we would survive in that environment. If you took a Neanderthal or Homo erectus and put them into our current society, would they have the ability to adapt and learn to survive in the current? And I think that would kind of answer your question. So I would argue that we are still biologically the same, like you're taller. We live longer because we have a better diet.
Yep, and medicine.
Right? And medicine.
Some of us.
And some of us. We live longer because, as you mentioned, we have vaccines, so we don't die from infectious diseases. That doesn't fundamentally change our DNA or our evolution. But I do think that we will have at some point some kind of evolutionary jump. And
CRISPR, we got it now. You can use CRISPR to directly change genetics of any being.
Yep. And there's also that crazy thing, the gene drive. We're probably getting way outside the topic of ecom at this point.
we totally did.
Yeah, true. This ended up just being like the futurism podcast.
Totally.
I'm cool with that.
We do the intro at the end.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Alycia. I mean, we're still genetically the same for sure. It's just, at what point do you have a shift? I mean, is it really the same? Would you put hunter-gatherer from 1,000 years ago, would you put that in the same species category as like a human today or a human 1,000 years from now? Right? That's kind of the idea.
Well, it's certainly better. Like the point, another result of the point that you just made is that a regular average middle class or even lower class person that takes part in society today has more luxury, more available to them than like the richest person on the planet 1,000 years ago.
Yep.
Like,
air conditioning.
We
didn't have air conditioning.
Yeah, dude.
That sucks.
They're sweating balls. Yeah, no matter what, they couldn't make toast. Toast is awesome. Avocado toast, like they probably would have killed for avocado toast. Communicating with someone across the world, like instantaneously, we're like gods. We're like more godly than the kings of 1,000 years ago. And like in the future, it's going to be the same, but it's not going to be 1,000 years from now. It's going to be 20 years from now. They'll be gods to us today, or we will if we're still alive. Hopefully we are.
It kind of goes back. I like things that are cyclical, and we're going to circle back to the beginning of this conversation, is what is it that, it's like macro versus micro, and what is it that makes a human being? When you look in a textbook and you look at like the development of man, we look at different time periods and we look at the technology that they use, but that isn't what defined them as human. That ultimately was a biological sensibility, and what makes human beings. The reason why Homo sapiens won the race is we are uniquely adaptable.
Yep.
And we are
and as a human, I love humans. Like I'm totally down with human beings, but as part of the only matter in the known universe that has consciousness, I'm not biased toward humans. If I'm representing just consciousness in general,
yes,
humans achieved this consciousness that allowed us to create all of this great stuff and observe the universe and make scientific discoveries by accident, because evolutionarily it was better to have a bigger brain than sharper claws. So that helped us survive. And then oops, it also let us see the universe. Whoa, now we have to wonder, what's the point? Why are we all here? And all these other messed up questions. But that was an accident. Now we're making consciousness on purpose. We're making artificial intelligence that's meant to understand things for the sake of understanding things, not because it makes you better at surviving because you can hunt better with tools. And that's a huge leap. That's going to change everything. And although it sucks for humans, because we'll probably go extinct or change form into an unrecognizable state, it's good for the universe, I would say, because it will allow the universe to understand itself in a more profound way than we ever could. And it's good for consciousness. It's good for that. The most beautiful part of the universe is us, exists inside our heads right now, because it's the most complex and the only aware and the only complex information processing that is possible in the entire known universe. But that doesn't mean that it's the best. There's definitely potential to be greater than that. This all happened by accident. So it sucks. It sucks that humans got to go. But it's cool that consciousness is going to evolve to the next level. And it's definitely, in my opinion, there's no chance it's going to be human.
Well, I guess it just depends on our definitions. I mean, I think that the consciousness is the beautiful thing, and that is what makes us, that is the beauty of human nature, isn't it? It's like what's inside. So, and that is the consciousness, and we all have different names for it. And some people would argue that it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an accident, and that the reason that humans are the only ones that have that sense of consciousness is because it was given to us. But that's a conversation for a different time. And so I don't know. I don't know the answers. I can't pretend to, but I think you've given me a lot to think about, Chris Rawlings and Andrew Erickson.
Awesome.
Same to you, Alycia Shapiro and Andrew Erickson.
Guys, I really appreciate you coming on, having this little discussion with us. That was super fun, and I hope we learned a little something. We got a little deep there in the stars or something for a minute. It was fun. So Alycia, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have to have you guys come back at some point.
Hell yeah, we'll all digest everything that each other said and come back, and we'll try to keep it on e-commerce that time if we can. Probably we won't.
Having conversations with you two is something I always want to do, so I will be here anytime you ask.
I'd love to. So much fun.
Thanks, guys. All right, I'll see you later.
All right. Peace.